I have always been a reader, but I haven't always been a good reader. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know, my name is Faith, and thank you so much for watching. Today, I'm going to take you guys through my reading journey because I used to be such a bad reader. And with the year being about halfway over, I've seen a ton of people giving progress on where they're at with their reading goal. And I've seen so many videos of people being like, oh, I've read over 100 books so far this year. And in the comments of those videos, I always see at least a few people being like, oh, I've only read 5. I wish I could read more. And I fully understand how demotivating it is to see how much you've read versus how much other people have read. Without further ado, let's just get into it. I don't know if you guys remember or if they did this for you guys when you were little, or if they even still do it anymore, but AR testing, where you would take a test. I don't know how often. I think we did it every quarter, and it would tell you your reading level, and then after each book you read, you took an AR test on that specific book, and then it'd basically give you a grade. That's what it was like at my school growing up, but I think they just gave us a goal to reach instead of actually putting it in as a grade, and I could be slightly wrong about that. This was literally over a decade ago. From the test that would show us our reading level, from what I remember, I was always right at where I was supposed to be or slightly above. So honestly, I have no idea why I struggled so much. Or, you know, maybe that testing system just wasn't that accurate, even though it actually seemed pretty accurate for everyone else. So maybe it was just me. When I was like 6 and younger, I was reading your average kid's book, like picture books and stuff like that. And when I got to 2nd grade, aka roughly 7 years old, everyone in my class was reading Magic Treehouse and Junie B. Jones. And looking back, I don't remember if they were reading it before we got to 2nd grade or what, but I just very vividly remember in 2nd grade, that's like what everybody was reading. And I don't remember the exact title of it, but I was reading the Magic Treehouse, the Emperor Penguin one, and it was one of the special ones that was bigger than the average Magic Treehouse book, probably like 2 or 3 times bigger. And this isn't really relevant, but for some reason I'm just remembering that I started reading it around the time of that oil spill that happened, but it took me forever to read that book. I'm talking at least a month, whereas other people in my class, like Bessie Ellie, who is probably the best reader in our class, could have finished that in less than a week. My microphone just died, so hopefully this one doesn't also die. Sometime when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, so I would have been 8 or 9, I discovered the Rainbow Magic Fairy books. The first one that I read was the Amethyst one, I believe. I don't remember if that was the name, but I remember the cover, so I'll put it right here. This is the first one that I read, and I discovered that I could read it in an hour. And I don't know why, but that was very motivating for me because I felt like, oh, I can finally read a book fast. So I was finally able to hit the reading goals that we were given by our teachers, and that was very motivating. So I upgraded a little bit to slightly bigger books like Judy Moody, or continuing with those special bigger editions of Magic Treehouse or Rainbow Fairy. I also read those Captain Underpants books and basically other similar books like that. And again, I was still testing either right at my age or slightly above. And honestly, I have no idea what an 8 or 9-year-old or really any age should be reading. And you know what? I say that I was a bad reader. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if it was more the fact that I was a bad reader or that all the other girls in my class were just significantly better readers than I was. Because in 4th grade, so when I was like 9, while I was reading, you know, Captain Underpants, Judy Moody, this one girl in my class, shout out Caitlin, was reading the entire Harry Potter series within like 3 months. So that was very demotivating to me. Because while I don't think anyone else in my class was reading that big of books yet, they were reading books more at that level than the level that I was reading at. But then we skipped to 5th and 6th grade, and when I call myself a bad reader, this is really the point in my life that I'm referencing. Because by the time my class had read every single one of these books, I hadn't even finished this one. I started the 2nd book, I gave up before page 20, because at that point the hype was over and they were all reading these books. So I gave up Sea of Monsters and started reading The Hunger Games. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't even remember if I actually finished this one. I either gave up on this one as well because they had again already finished and moved on before I finished it, or I finished it and didn't even start the 2nd one. So another case of being demotivated to continue because of how far everyone else was ahead of me. But then we had Divergent, and I actually put them all on this. I started this before every single one of them. But wouldn't you know it, they finished every single one of these before I finished Divergent. Mind you, it took me 6 months to read this book. And I've mentioned before that our teachers set reading goals for us, and I forget exactly how they did it. I think it was just read a certain number of books. And I remember that Divergent happened in 6th grade, and our teacher had like a little thermometer thing that we would fill in as we finished books. But again, I spent literally the entire semester reading this book. And so my mom literally went to my teacher to vouch for me as to why I was so far from my goal. And my teacher literally told my mom, oh no, I totally understand. Anytime there was free time, she was reading. I know that she was trying really hard to finish this. says. Shout out Mrs. Wolf. But I say that to say I was actively reading these books and I was just so far behind everybody else in my class. I did start this book, but it was so boring that I never went back to it, and to this day I haven't finished this one or read Allegiant, whereas I've now read every single Hunger Games book and every Percy Jackson book, but I still need to read Heroes of Olympus, which I will be doing this year. And also in 6th grade I tried reading Twilight, but again it was just too hard for me to read, so I stopped. And that one, actually nobody in my class had read that one, so I wasn't too upset about that. And now I've read all the Twilight books except for Midnight Sun. But I will get to it one day. I switched schools in 7th grade from a private school to a public school, which isn't fully relevant. It's just to say I was now surrounded by a completely different group of people. In 7th grade, I tried the Hunger Games again, and I know for a fact I got through the full first book this time, and I started catching fire, but I gave up on it. I can't fully remember why. The entire second semester of 7th grade, so when I was about 12, I was reading the first 3 Harry Potter books, and I either just didn't read over the summer or I read something else, because when I was 8th grade, now 13, I started reading the 4th book, and I don't remember how long it took me to read each book after this, but I know school was still in session when I was reading the 4th and 5th book, because I was reading in school and I had to stop because Sirius's death was about to happen, so I had to read that at home because I knew I would cry. And I did. So I know I was still in 8th grade when reading those two. I don't remember when I started book 6, but I know it was summer when I finished book 7, and I flew through book 7. I finished it, I want to say, in 2 days. I either started book 6 right before or right after school ended that year, because I know for a fact I read all of book 7 and either all or most of book 6 within like a week during summer. And at that point, that's when something kind of clicked and I was starting to read faster. Not sure why, I just was. And then a couple days after I finished book 7, I read The Cursed Child in less than a day, which we're actually not going to speak about because that book was terrible. And it's technically not even a book, it's like a script. But then we enter high school. And for the first 2 years when I was 14 and 15, I was pretty much just reading whatever, whenever. I wasn't really dedicated to a series or anything. But like I said, something clicked and I was reading a lot faster than I was before. The summer before my freshman year of high school, Spider-Man Homecoming came out, and I was obsessed with Tom Holland. I forget the timeline of this, so I guess this could have happened during my sophomore year. I think it was mainly my junior year. It was announced that Tom Holland was going to be in the Chaos Walking movie, and I found out they were books, and I read what it was about, and it sounded really good, so I wanted to read those before I saw the movie. Now that I'm saying this out loud, though, I am having very blurry memories of when this happened, because I have very vivid memories of me reading the first book in my freshman year English class and the last book in my junior year homeroom, but I also don't remember it taking me that long to read the series at all. So I'm really just gonna say sometime between the age of 14 and 16, I read this series. And honestly, to this day, the Chaos Walking series is one of my favorite series of all time. I think it is insanely underrated, and I seriously think everybody should go read these. If you watched the movie, ignore that, because it is genuinely one of the worst book to film adaptations I've ever seen in my entire life. And I recently started a series where I compare book to film adaptations, and I'm definitely going to be doing that at one point. Sometime between freshman and junior year, I read those. And then again, it kind of continued with just sporadic reading whatever, whenever. My senior year of high school was 2020 to 2021. And for those of you who don't remember what happened, that was the pandemic. And I'm not going to explain why, but it is important context. I did do my senior year entirely online, minus a couple weeks at the beginning of the year. Not all of my classes required me to join a Zoom call, so I did have a lot of extra free time. So I decided I would try Percy Jackson again. And I'm not entirely sure why, but again, I kind of just gave up on it. I only read the first book, didn't even try to read the second book. I don't want to redo everything that I just filmed, so just know I'm about to tell you that I read Twilight between my junior year and senior year of high school. That is not true. I read it between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college. And then the summer between junior and senior year, I picked up this series, which in case you can't tell, is Twilight. And like I said before, when I was about 10 or 11, I did try to read Twilight, but I gave up on it. And I am so glad I picked this back up, because this series is what started all of this. I read this entire series in less than a week, and I do not think I would be as big of a reader as I am without this series. And it's crazy that of all the series that I've pointed out to you, it's Twilight that I am saying that about. But all the series I've mentioned today has played a vital role in my reading journey, and honestly just my life as a whole. I actually have a very vivid memory of my swim coach Jacob getting mad at me at a swim meet because I was so tired, because I stayed up until 2 a.m. reading Eclipse. I guess he heard me telling my friends that I was reading Twilight, because he was like, "Why were you up so late reading Twilight?" And I was like, "Actually, Jacob, it was Eclipse." And then we started talking about Twilight, and then he was like, "Are you Team Edward or Team Jacob?" And I was like, "Edward, duh." And he's like, "I'm Team Jacob," because his name is Jacob. And I have no idea why that memory just sticks in my head, but it does. And don't pay attention that I have the movie cover edition of New Moon. I'm actually probably going to try to get the original cover as soon as possible, because the new covers that they're printing now are so freaking ugly. That's not really relevant to my reading journey, but I thought I'd throw that in there. But like I said, thanks to Twilight, all of this happened. In order to remain transparent and honest about my reading journey, and since I have mentioned this in past videos, I did have a Colleen Hoover phase. Christmas 2020, I got It Ends With Us, and I read that at the very beginning of 2021. At the time, I did like it. I think if I reread it, I wouldn't, but It Ends With Us sparked something, and I got a ton of Colleen Hoover books. And at the time, I did like them, but I didn't read all the ones I had. And in the past couple years, when I try to go back and read one of her books I didn't read, I've absolutely hated it, which is why I say I think if I reread It Ends With Us or any of the ones that I read at the time and did like, I wouldn't like, with the exception of Verity, because honestly, I do think that was really good, but there's also rumors that that was ghostwritten. Allegedly, that is not me accusing or saying anything. That is all just a rumor. Now that I was actually feeling like a good reader because I read basically all the time, I decided to give The Hunger Games another try, and I read all 3 of them within a week. And to this day, it is a series that I think literally everybody should read. They are so good. And then I forget the exact time frame. I think it was that summer. The audio cut out, but what I was gonna say is that summer I did actually go back and reread the remaining Percy Jackson books, and I loved them so much, read each of them in less than a day. I didn't reread The Lightning Thief just because I didn't want to risk getting demotivated again, so I started with The Sea of Monsters. I'm really glad that I read them, but I wish I could have just gotten through them sooner. So after a couple years of reading pretty much just romance, I picked up ACOTAR, and I don't care what anybody says, I freaking love ACOTAR. Love them. And then after I finished ACOTAR, I pretty much immediately picked up Fourth Wing, and I freaking love it. I don't care what anyone else has to say about it. And I finished Fourth Wing about a month before Iron Flame came out, and in that month, I could do nothing but think of Fourth Wing. So now let's just fast forward to today, because the last 3-4 years have pretty much been the same of I read a lot. The past few years, I've read roughly 40 books every year, and this year I'm already at 30. If you told 10-year-old me that, I would have laughed in your face. I went from giving up on multiple series just because of how demotivated I was to read to owning over 250 books, and that number will most likely just continue to grow. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I fully understand how demotivating it is to see how much other people are reading around you and you feel like you are really just lagging behind. If I could tell you how to stop feeling demotivated by seeing people read so much more than you, I would. But unfortunately, I don't really have a solution. And even if I did, what works for one person might not work for others. For me, I kind of just had to stop comparing myself to others. And of course, that took time. It wasn't just an overnight switch. But I really do think that is just the best solution. If I still compared what I read to what other people are reading, I would not be anywhere near where I'm at now with what I read. My point really is that regardless of age, you're not going to read at the same speed as everyone else around you. Also, a lot of the people you see saying, oh, I've read over 100 books so far this year, are full-time content creators whose job is basically to read. So while you're out working your 9 to 5 and don't have the ability to read during that time, they're spending their 9 to 5 reading because that pretty much is their job. So yeah, they're going to be reading more than you simply because that's what they're spending their time doing. If you're going to compare yourself to them, you can't just compare, oh, they've read 10,000 books this year, I've read 1. You need to also compare, oh, they have the time to read 10,000 books, I don't. But you know what? Even if you had the exact same amount of time to read books and they're still ahead of you, that's okay. You don't need to read the same amount or at the same speed as everybody else. So I share my reading journey with you today in hopes that you understand you're not the only person who's felt bad about their reading abilities or skills or anything like that. And it's okay to not read 100+ books in a year. And reading is a skill that, just like every other skill, it takes time to develop and get better at. So for the billionth time, I understand how demotivating it can be to see how far ahead other people are around you. So if you want advice or just to vent, you can always come to me. You can leave a comment on here, or you can DM me on Instagram, link in the description. And I'm not a licensed therapist or a motivational speaker or anything like that, but I would be more than happy to help. So yeah, I hope this was insightful, maybe. I hope this helped at least one person out there. And yeah, that is all that I have for you guys today. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow my Instagram in the description for more bookish content. I hope you're all having a wonderful summer. I hope you have a fantastic day. Love you guys. Bye.